Thanks for stopping by the My Read a Moment. Remember, this is the backup channel to the My Read a Minute. Let's just get started. Okay. This episode, I feel like it might have been a little bit of a filler episode. Wasn't really much going on. I'm starting to see a lot of, and I guess a lot of produced scenes. It's not really doing it for me anymore. But I'm going to review it. I think this might be the last season I review it. Maybe this is the last season they're going to be around. I don't know, but I don't know. This episode really didn't do it for me. But let's get started. So the first scene is with Destiny, Martell, and Chris. Martell is meeting Destiny and Chris to talk about this house he's planning on building, and I guess they're both going to be on the list to be the agent. He said it is a 7 bath, 7 bedroom, multi-million-dollar home. He said, I guess the land that it's going to be built on is the land that he owned when he was married and he lost it, I guess, in a divorce or due to bankruptcy, but now he has it back. He didn't go into detail about how all that went, but I guess he has this land. And Chris asked him how long did he think it was going to take to build, and he said basically in about a month they'll be ready to turn the dirt and maybe complete it within 7 or 8 months. And then Chris, as they were looking at the blueprint, Destiny was like, "Oh, is that the same blueprint or same paper?" Or what? I think she said the same blueprint as I've seen before. He said, "Oh yeah, you remember?" She was like, "Yeah, I think it's in my email." I guess letting Chris know that, she's already been put on notice about this house. Chris, in his confessional, basically said he didn't know what Destiny's background was in real estate, but he'll probably have this house sold before it's built. Okay. All righty then. Did y'all happen to see Martell's shirt though? He knew that that shirt was too daggone tight. He had to unbutton it at the table. Destiny kind of like, that button is screaming, but she didn't say that. I'm paraphrasing, but that button was screaming. I saw when he got out the car, walking across the parking lot, and the button was pulling. Oh my God, that thing was like help, holding on for life. Anyway, so they switched subjects. I don't know if Chris asked, "How did you enjoy game night?" Game No, somebody said, "How did you enjoy game night?" I don't know if it was Martell or who, but anyway, Destiny said, "I enjoyed it until the pool." And Martell was being smart. He said, "Oh, until Lance rolled up with that baddie." And she's like, "No, not that. I wasn't even thinking about that." She brings up the fact that, everything was okay until the pool situation. And Chris basically said Nell felt like she was being ganged up on by everybody. And his whole thing is like, if the issue was between Tisha and Nell, why was everybody out there conversating? And Destiny was pleading her case, basically saying that, well, it was her fault. Because she was the one that carried the bone back. And I'm paraphrasing. She basically said she was the one that brought it up to Tisha about Nell saying something about the whole phone call thing and why y'all left LA and all that kind of stuff. And she was the one that brought it back to Tisha, and she said she was really there just trying to diffuse the situation. And then I guess in on Destiny's confessional, she basically said if she's like shocked that Nell felt that she was being ganged up on, and maybe they need to have a conversation about it to kind of like clear the air and make sure everything's cool. Because I don't think that was the intent. I don't know why she would be shocked that she said that because she said it out there with them. She's like, "What are y'all doing? What is this, gang up on Nell?" She said that. What do you mean? Acting like she all brand new. I remember anyway. So they move on. They start talking about, "Oh, well, we see you brought Will to game night." And Chris said, "How you feel about Will?" She was like, "Oh my goodness, gosh, wow." She said, "How long have you known him?" She was like, "A few weeks." She said, "I like his company. He's nice." And so then they said, "Well, how long have you known Twan?" She was like, "Dang." She's like, and then Martell was like going through all her lineup. And he said, "Are you and Lance done?" And she said, "Yeah, I think me and Lance are done." And then she looks at Chris and says, "Sorry, you can't be my father-in-law." He's like, "Okay." So then they started to talk about Will and how they had conversations about, her and everything. And Martell says he act like he just wants to hit it and quit it. And Destiny was like, "Well, That ain't happening. She's like, and you're not hitting this unless you commit. She said, ask Lance. Martell was basically saying something about holding out, like women shouldn't expect to get a significant other or to get a boyfriend if they're not willing to give out or give up everything. So Destiny was like, so you think that every woman that goes on a date should be giving it up to everybody they go on a date with? And he was looking at all crazy, like as if to say, yeah. Evidently, that's what happens with him, clearly. Hello, Ariane, you listening? Mhm. And she was like, "Well, you can go ahead and settle." She says, "Because you settled, because you bald and losing your umps," and they kinda laugh it off or whatever. Can I say something real quick? I don't know if I really like this storyline, and I really think that Destiny's storyline is fake. Only because, we've always had qualms about Destiny not being transparent or letting us into what's going on in her real life. So I feel like she's called herself showcasing it on the show. So there are no questions. Okay, I'm going to date this one and this one and that one. You just happen to be dating everybody that's in the cast. So can't nobody say that you're not sharing what's really going on in your real life. That's what you're saying. To me, this is fake because clearly you knew Will was on the show before. He ain't just get there. You just known him a couple of weeks. Get out of here. No, you haven't. You know what I'm saying? He was on there the last couple of years because he's been Ken's friend. So that's bullcrap. So this is a fake storyline, and I'm not buying it. Next scene is Nell and Chris. Nell is, fixing up her flower arrangement in the front. Chris comes downstairs and basically tells her that they may have found a spot for her boutique, but they're still looking. They should have something, by the end of the month or something like that. I don't know. And she was like, great. And then she goes and her confessional talks about she's opening a clothing boutique called Posh and Pritzy. Pritzy is the name that her grandmother used to always call her. So they're sitting down talking about, it's got to be a certain type of square footage. She's excited. She wants to go along to make sure that they're doing the right thing. Next, they hear a knock at the door. It's Lance. Lance is stopping by. He basically sits down and talks with them. And in his confessional, he talks about how he's rehired his little brother, little Chris, and that, she sees some improvement, but not much. He said he can't really pay him, I guess, what he wants to be paid because he doesn't have the skill set, at least not yet. And evidently, little Chris has gone back to Nell and kind of complained about it, which she feels as though is putting her in the middle, and she doesn't want to be in the middle. So they're talking about maybe they all need to get together and have like the Fletcher's dinner again. Now, to me, this is talking about this. To me, this is her trying to recreate the family dinner. Remember when we were introduced to them the first time? They had the Fletcher family dinner, and you got introduced to her niece, her daughter, her little Chris, and Lance, Lexi, who is Chris's daughter, and her husband. And I feel like they were trying to recreate that whole dynamic. But you can't recreate that. I'm sure they tried to get Lexi to come on, but I doubt it because, Lexi's pretty much had it with them. That's in real life. But anyway, so the new people that they brought on was Lance's girlfriend, um, Kira, and Twan, Nell's godson or Lance's friend or whatever. I don't know what he is. Anyway, so those are the two added individuals in place of Lexi and her husband. Anyway, so they've decided to get together for another conversation to hash out some issues or at least have a family discussion. Chris asked Nell, do you want me to invite Dr. Francis? And she was like, no. If he comes, I'm not going to be there. Which I feel like they need Dr. Francis. At least Nell does. And maybe she doesn't because I feel like a lot of this is put on in acting anyway. So, no, don't waste Dr. Francis' time. I'm with her. So the next scene is Destiny and Will. Will has invited Destiny out on a skate date and talk about safety first. Destiny put on her skates. She put on a helmet. She put on knee pads, and she was ready. But anyway, I don't know if she can skate or not, but she was kind of wobbly on them skates. Plus, they were on a sidewalk. It wasn't like a rink, so they were kind of like going over the grooves, and it wasn't just like a smooth skating area. So he said, next time we'll have to find a rink. She was like, yeah. But they sit down and to have a discussion, and it was really cute. I thought the date was gonna start off really cute because he brought like a picnic basket. And he was like, in this picnic basket, I have like some articles in there and that'll help you get to know me better. And I was like, oh, that's cute, right? So he pulls out a basketball and basically said, I guess that's his love. He likes basketball. It's a reminder that, you need to just stop and smell the roses. They take a break from work and the kids, and then something. And when he said kids, she said, "Oh, how many do you have?" And he said, "4." And she said, "4 kids, okay." And she said, "You have 4 kids and you've not been married?" And he was like, "Well, all those different relationships, were something different." She was like, "You got 4 baby mamas?" He was like, "Yeah." He said, "My youngest one being 6 years old." And she was like, "Well, how come you've never been married?" He said he's never wanted to commit. He said, but he feel like he would commit maybe to the right person or persons. It was a lot of red flags in this conversation. It was a lot of red flags in this conversation. So let me just stop and say this. You know how they say sometimes men don't want to date women if they have like more than one child or children at all, if that's the case. After you get to a certain age, I mean, sometimes it's kind of inevitable. But the thing of it is, if you don't want to be committed because a woman is tied down with 2 or 3 kids, what makes you think a woman even wants to even date you when you have 4? You have 4 baby mamas. Were they hit it and quit it too? And you just got stuck with the children? I mean, I'm just saying. I don't know. We'll eh, let's move on from him. I don't think that there needs to be a second date. I think she needs to move on from this. But anyway, I thought that the date started off kind of cute. Skate date, here's a picnic basket, and looked like they had some fruit and some wine on there. Looked like they had nice conversation, but the conversation went south. Sounds like really quick. I don't know how long they were out there, but it is what it is. So Destiny said, well, he had brought up the fact that maybe they could, go on their second date. So he's already trying to hurry up and get to maybe his hit it and quit it date, whatever date that is. Maybe that's date 3. I don't know. But she said, I have some questions for you first. And he was like, well, I'll never lie to you. He said, but I ain't going to volunteer the truth either. This dude is off the charts. Like, Will, we really don't need to go any further with this conversation. I was done for Destiny, even if she wasn't. She said, "Oh, so you're not forthcoming with anything?" And she said, "Martell told me you're the hit it and quit it type of guy." He said, "Martell, you talk to Martell a lot?" And she was like, "Yeah, Martell's the homie." He was like, "Oh, okay." He said, "No." He said, "It was probably, a joke or something like that." She said, "Oh, it was like a guy outing or whatever." He said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we went and worked out at the gym or whatever." He was like, "And I asked about you." He said, "But it was really a joke." He was like, "What's up with you and my homeboy Twan?" And she was like, "Huh?" She said, "Well, he was my bodyguard for my event that I had." And he was like, "Oh, really?" He said, "Oh, me and Twan are good buddies. We go back to 2002." And she turned around. She was like, "Oh my gosh." She was like, "Huntsville is just too small." He said, "That's the Ville." But my whole thing is, I don't believe this for 1 second. I believe whoever Destiny is seeing, we're not going to know about it. This is just for the show. However, it's painting her in a real bad light. And if that's how she wants to be painted, then by all means, go for it. Anyway, so the next scene is Martell and Ken and Will. They get together, they're playing basketball. And Martell said, y'all getting ready for the big day? And they're like, Ken and Will looking at him like, what big day? And he said, to play against the Scott brothers. He said, they looking forward to it. They was like, oh yeah, whatever. We ain't thinking about that or whatever. So, Will brought it up. He was like, "Oh," he said, "Did Destiny tell you that I went on a date with her?" And he said, "Oh yeah. How'd that go?" He was like, "Oh, it was cool." He was like, "I had to tell her that you was on some you might be hitting and quit it to be watching out or something to that effect." I'm paraphrasing. I'm not sure what he said. I had to warn her. And he was like, "Man, why would you tell her that?" He said, "Why would you tell her something like that?" He was like, "That's my girl." He said, "We go back, then he had to think about it, since high school, or think of his lie or whatever he had told, because I don't believe that. I believe him and Destiny might have had something. But that's my opinion. I won't go into that. But he was like, I had to warn her. He was like, warn her? He was like, why would you go back and tell her something like that? So Kim was like, well, how did the date go anyway? He was like, it was over after that she told me after he had told her the game plan. So Martell looked at him. He was like, well, that was really a game plan. He was like, no, not really. He said, but I'm not really trying to get involved or commit to anybody. He said, I understand. He said, you're not really ready for a relationship. He said, no. He said, well, I think y'all, Martell said, I really think y'all would make a nice couple. He was like, yeah, I think Will said, "Yeah, I think we would." He said, "She's a nice looking girl." She said, "She looked nice on my arm." He said, "But I'm not looking to get engaged really fast and divorced really quickly." He said, "I understand that." Will, stay away from him. He is a F boy, and nobody's, once you get past a certain age, damn them F boys. He want to be out there making babies, fine. Hopefully his 6-year-old will be his last, but I doubt it because he's a hit it and quit it, and somebody gonna get him caught up. He'll come across the right young girl and be done. So there's that. The next is the family dinner. Nell has had this dinner catered. All the like her son, her daughter, um, Twan. Everybody is there. Kiara has been invited by Lance, and the guys go into another room to talk, and he tells them to get this, the dinner, their dinner ready and all that kind of stuff. So they go in the other room to talk, and I think Lance said, "How's everything going?" or whatever, and then Chris basically says, they were up all night with the baby, and I'm thinking they're talking about Lance's baby because you know Lance basically said, "Yeah, I'm sure you were." He said, "I think it was her allergies or something that she was up with," and then they were talking about how they had to like clean out her nose and all that kind of stuff or whatever. And then pipes up, little Chris pipes up and said, I'm new to all this. He said, but I love it. He said, I make sure that before I do anything, I think about her first. And it's funny that, I'm glad to hear him talk like that because evidently this is a love that he's never felt before. And I'm happy. I was happy to hear that too. He said, whatever I do, he said, before I do it, I put her first. And Big Chris was basically saying, I'm glad to hear you say that, son. So then they go back in the kitchen with Nell and her girls, and it's Nell's daughter, her niece, and Kiera. And her daughter pipes up and says, well, when's the last time you've been around the ladies? Destiny, Kimmy, and Nell was getting ready to get into it the last time they were together, but she was like, well, I don't know. The last time I was with them, she said Kiara was there. And so they hopped over to her. She said, oh, you met Destiny? And she said, yeah, she was there. She said, but, I felt like, someone kept like staring at me all night. Every time I glanced over, she'd be looking at me with this little fake grin or whatever. And so, Nell basically says that, she might be a little jealous or whatever. She said, she said that after the night of the game night, she said, I had the grandkids. And she said, but she said Destiny has stopped over. And because I think she said Lance went to go get a pizza for the kids or something like that. And she said, next thing I know, Destiny was outside talking or whatever. She said, I don't know what they was talking about. So they get at the table, and the first thing out of Kara's mouth was like, I heard about Destiny stopping over. He said, you didn't tell me about that. And Lance was like, whoa, 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 hold up, hold up, hold up. She said, yeah, he said, I went to go get pizza for the kids. And he said, I looked up and there was a card at the end of the thing. And he was like, he looked, he said, oh, that's Destiny. I don't even like the way this story sounded because it sounded like it was made up. But anyway, he said he goes out there and she said she was on Childgate. And I guess she was riding around her son trying to put him to sleep in the car. And in Nell and Chris's confessional, they was like, "That's strange." She said, "Because Destiny lives on the other side of town. It's not like you would just haphazardly coming past the house." And so then Nell pipes up and chimes in and puts more oil on the fire, basically, and saying, "Yeah, well, she's a little flirt." Or whatever, and y'all chemistry. And then Lance admitted, he said, "Yeah, we do have chemistry." He said, "But me and her have had a conversation, and we cool." We said we found closure. He said, "We cool. We were friends first." And so Twan said that he had gone out on a date with her. No, I think, how did that come about? She said, so then Nell said, yeah. So somebody said, well, Destiny needs to be single. She can date whoever she want or whatever. And Nell said, yeah, she can date whoever she wants. She said, I don't know who she's dating. She said, I don't even know who Twan is dating. I don't know if he's dating anybody else or not. So he pipes up. He said, well, I went out on a date with Destiny. And um he said, "A date?" She said, "So, Nelson, you went out with her?" He said, "Well, it really wasn't a date. It was a business dinner." And she said, "Well, who arranged this business dinner?" She said, they were talking about him being her bodyguard. And Nelson, she gonna pay you? He said, well, that's the intent. She's supposed to pay me. And then she said, and she brings Will to the game night. And so little Chris pipes up and says, so you telling me she like Lance, Twan, and Will? And somebody said, yeah, you next, little Chris. I don't know if this is a good storyline, Destiny, but you might need to rethink this because I understand you're not trying to be transparent with your real life, but this ain't it. This ain't it at all. And it's dumb. And we know that there's more people in Huntsville, but the three that's on the cast of Love and Marriage Huntsville. So let's stop this. This is crazy. Let me back up a minute. So when Kiara comes in, Nell, I think in the kitchen they were saying something about before they went out to the table. She said, "Oh, somebody said Mama usually cooks, but 'cause she's a real cook, but Nell had the food catered." And she said, "Oh, well, I'll just have to come back the next time and get your get your food or whatever." And Nell said, "Yeah, you have to come back next time." And she said, "That's right, claim your man," or whatever. So Nell put her hand up as if she was saying, "Oh, you gonna leave mama hanging?" So when she said that, Kira says, "Oh, I can call you mama?" And she's like, "Let's just start with Miss Nell." And so again, so I'm going back to the table. So when they're at the table and Kira's talking to Lance. And Nell is like, well, Lance, when me and you had a conversation at your house, you basically said that you weren't ready to date. Now I'm finding out that you're dating. And Lance was like, well, yeah, I'm dating, but I'm not exclusive, but I'm not seeing anybody else right now either. So Kiara pipes up and says, well, whenever we decide not to be not exclusive, you're going to need to ask me to be your girlfriend. So in Nell's confessional, she goes, I think Kiara's doing too much. She needs to just pump her brakes, slow down. But I don't think that, to be honest, this is Marita Menace speaking. I don't think that Kiara was doing too much. She was making herself at home. She was making herself comfortable. Nell introduced herself as mama. She didn't say, oh, you're going to leave Miss Nell hanging. She said, oh, you're going to leave mama hanging? That's what she said. So that's why Kara said, oh, I can call you mama? And she said, let's just start with Miss Nell. Let's start there first. And so I don't think that that was out of the way. And then when she was talking to Lance, she wasn't asking to be his girlfriend. She said, "Oh, well, whenever we decide, or I guess he decides that he does no longer want to be exclusive, you're going to have to ask me to be your girlfriend." She wasn't asking to be the girlfriend. So I don't think that Kiara was doing too much. I thought she was just staking her claim, like, this is where I'm at with it, and that's how I'm carrying it. So I commend Kiara. If she likes Lance, let it be known that you like him. But at the same time, you're going to have to ask me to be your girlfriend, because I'm not going to, you know, unless you say something, I can date other people too. I'm hoping that's what she meant by it, but I don't know. So then Big Chris looks at Little Chris and says, "I want to talk to you about what you said earlier." Because Little Chris had mentioned that was in a space and he didn't know what to do, and he was sleeping in his car. He slept in his car for 2 nights. And he wanted to know why he didn't come in and talk to them. And his thing was, I need to figure my own stuff out. He was like, "I feel like sometimes you all do too much." He said, "I feel like, you know, because they do too much, it kind of holds him back." And he just basically, in so many words, said he needed to figure this stuff out himself instead of running to them. I thought that was a very mature answer. I thought that was very mature for him to acknowledge that they do a lot for them. And instead of letting them grow up and figure it out themselves, they always help them out and don't let them figure it out themselves, and always there as the helping hand. And then Chris, on top of that, basically said when they do that, they always like hold it over their head. Like, this is what I did for you. And, even though you're doing this, I need you to do this, da, 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 da. And he said he just wanted to figure it out himself. He's tired of people holding stuff over his head. I'm paraphrasing, but I got what he was saying. But now turned that into something else. And I don't know if she was looking for a moment or what have you, but Lance was like, "Mom, what are you doing?" And so, because Chris said, well, I can't remember exactly what Big Chris said, but Big Chris basically said something like, "What do you mean we're holding it over your head?" He said, "Oh, what you define as, I guess, what we think is spoiled, you all say or look at it as being entitled." But he wasn't saying that. He didn't want to feel like he was being entitled. He said he was trying to figure it out for himself. So I don't even know why Chris went down that road. He says, so then Chris says, "It was plenty of times where I basically said I didn't want to help. I want to just let y'all go." And then for some reason, Nell got upset and was basically saying, "So you're saying that to say what?" Basically saying that I'm the one that always chimed in because you wanted to let it go. It's like she intentionally wanted to start an argument. And Big Chris basically said, "No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that it was times where, should I have said we want to let it go?" She was like, so Lance jumped in and was like, "Mom, that's not what he's saying." And she got upset with Lance as if to say, he don't need you to take up for him. If he want to defend himself, he can defend his own self. So Big Chris says, "So what am I defending?" And she looked crazy because you could tell she was looking for a moment, and it didn't, the scene didn't go exactly like she wanted to go. She gets up and leaves from the table. And I'm like, whatever she tried to do, it didn't work. I feel like she was trying to recreate a scene, or a scene similar to what they had the first time, because that's kind of like what put them on the map, the Fletcher family. But the people weren't there to make it go. So Kiara had to play her part by asking the questions. Twan had to, put in his part by talking about destiny, because they didn't have Lexi this time. It was an epic fail. It was an epic fail. So I'm not really, these storylines are crazy and made up. Yeah, that was it. That's how it went off. So I don't know what y'all felt about this episode. I'm not really feeling it. Let's get in the comments and chat about it if you want to. If not, that's fine too. Anyway, y'all, please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Subscribing to the channel is a free way to support. This is my backup channel. I'm trying to grow this channel. If you can help me out, I really, really, really appreciate it. The primary channel is the Myrita Minutes. This is the Myrita Moment. Thanks for joining. Everyone be blessed. Peace.